Michigan's most impressive performance since... It's been a while. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. As the Wolverines come off, there are dominations and then there are complete and total dismantlings. And that's exactly what Michigan did to Nebraska on Saturday. Now, you'll recall after the big win over Western Michigan, I'm like, it's Western Michigan. After the game against SMU, I'm like, it's SMU. And I am still in the same place I advised all of you to be after the loss to Notre Dame, which is, this is an 8-4 baseline program until they show us that they can beat a ranked team on the road, win a rivalry game, make them show us. Don't sit here and project and argue with one another. Make them show us. And I'm still there. But I know we have this new religion in America where we just, it's our false binary choices, where we just attempt to impose false binary choices on each other all day long in all walks of life, and can't be adults that draw distinctions and think that multiple things can be simultaneously true. So in the big picture, in terms of what Saturday's game means and how good this team is, I'm not any different than I was 3 weeks ago. I'm still all about do it against somebody we need to do it against first, and then we'll talk. But this effort, there's no other way to describe it. It was impressive. And before you say, but Steve, Nebraska's not any good, I want you to consider this. I know Nebraska was 0-2, but heading into the game, Nebraska had outgained its first two opponents by almost 300 yards and almost 1.5 yards per play, which is really good. And they had 11 sacks. Those are hardly the makings of a typical 0-2 team. And then you look at the two teams Nebraska played. Colorado's going to probably end up with 6 to 8 wins by the time this season is over. Troy is a perennial group of 5 bowl team, and they won at LSU last year, who was 9-3. So, I mean, they played two pretty good opponents early on in the non-conference, and statistically, they just dominated them. So when you throw those things in, that's not what an 0-2 team typically looks like. And then you have Scott Frost publicly challenging his team the way that he did after that loss to Troy. I really thought Nebraska would come in with its hair on fire, play with a ton of pride, and Michigan, might pull away late to make the game look a little bit more deceptively in the bag than it was if you actually watched it. And what happened instead is the Wolverines came out to send a message, punched Nebraska in the mouth, and something I would have never guessed would happen to a Scott Frost coach team. Nebraska looked totally disinterested from that point forward. Michigan, for the first time in a while, probably Maryland, which was the last game of 2016 before Wilton Spate got hurt, and that really put that team behind the eight ball. For the first time since that game, really broke a team's will. And I don't count Western Michigan. I mean like a major conference team. Just broke their will in the game. In all facets of the game, they had a 64-yard punt. They had a punt return for a touchdown. They had 14 tackles for loss. 11 different guys caught passes. 8 different guys carried the football. This was a dominant performance. Everywhere you looked, even Quinn Nordine became only the second kicker in Michigan history to have 3 kicks of 50 yards or more, and he's just a redshirt sophomore. Everywhere you looked, in every facet of the game, this was an impressive effort. So, what we got a glimpse of on Saturday is the team that I thought we were going to be this season. This is a very talented team. When you look at the second team defensive guys, watch Kwity Paye coming off the edge. And if you just put a number 3 jersey on him, just put a number 3 instead of a number 19 on him, you would know that wasn't Rashawn Gary, man. Watching him come off the edge, he is a holy terror. Look at our linebackers. Watch Josh Uche, Jordan Anthony. Watch the second string linebackers. You may notice the difference in closing speed from a Devin Bush because Devin Bush has a Roquan Smith type closing speed. There may not be another linebacker in college football this year that closes like he does, but as a unit, you don't really see much of a drop off there. You look at the depth at tailback, you look at the top 4 receivers on this team, you look at the depth at tight end. Those first 2 recruiting classes. And even last year's Much Pan class, which was still a top 25 class, you see the depth is there. Our backup quarterback is outrunning their starting linebacker for 75-yard gains. Okay, this is a talented team. We should be doing this. What we saw on Saturday, we should be doing this more often. And when you have this kind of talent, I think expectations change accordingly. So to me, it's about we have to be a team that's competing for the Big Ten championship. To do that, you got to beat ranked teams on the road. Hell, you got to beat anybody on the road. You got to beat ranked teams on the road, and you've got to win your rivalry games. Now, this week's game against Northwestern, it's a great dress rehearsal for Michigan State. Similar styles of offenses, similar styles of coaches. Both games on grass. Now, half the fans there are going to be Michigan fans. I know my son and I will be two of them. We're going to the game on Saturday, but it's a good dry run dress rehearsal. Northwestern's without by far its best offensive player. Sad news about Jeremy Larkin retiring from football for cervical stenosis. So, this is a game, when you look at the 22 guys Northwestern's going to start on Saturday, I don't know, with 2, 3 of them, maybe, start for Michigan. So, this is the game. If we're the team I think we can be, maybe there's a slow start, that Pat Fitzgerald emotion for a while, but Michigan should cover the number in this game, which is about 2 touchdowns. This should be like a 27-10 game. There's no way Northwestern should get 2 touchdowns, as pedestrian as they are on offense. This is the most thick-ankled wide receiver core I've seen in the Big Ten. I don't know. Since before Al Gore invented the internet, it's been a while. There's some thick ankles out there for the Wildcats, and Larkin's the one game-breaking player they had, and now he's gone. So unless we're turning the ball over, they should not get more than 1 touchdown against our defense. This should be a game that if we are the team we looked last week like we could be, this is like a 27-10, 31-13 kind of a win for Michigan. You get in, get her done, and we'll see you all next week for homecoming. But I wouldn't jump off the bandwagon, and I wouldn't start drinking the Kool-Aid. Again, make them show us. What we've seen is the talent is there, and now they just have to execute when it matters the most. I want to say thank you. We've landed several new Patreon supporters at Michigan Podcast since the season started. Thank you to those of you that are supporting us. And if you would like to, we want you to know that you get some exclusive content that we provide for you each week via Patreon, including my instant reaction post-game podcast, my picks for the Michigan game, pre-kickoff, and more. As a thank you to those of you that decide that you like what we do here at Michigan Podcast enough to support us at Patreon. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Back here on Michigan Podcast and joined by my partner over there at Wolverine Digest, Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor. And Michael, we opened up the show this week talking about, I know we live in this culture now where our new favorite American civil religion is false binary choices, where two things cannot be simultaneously true. And you have to choose which terrible choice, which blade to the throat from which angle you prefer, or everybody hates you and you're a terrible person, right? That's the world in which we live, but I refuse to join because I like adult world. And so in adult world, you like adult world too. That's good. So in adult world, I'm not off where I was 3 weeks ago. Until they show us they can win a big game on the road, they can beat a rival. This is an 8-4 baseline program, but at the same token, I can't overlook the total and complete domination on Saturday. I thought that was the first time Michigan came out against a major conference team and just broke their will and took their manhood, probably since the Maryland game at the end of 2016, right before Wilton Spate got hurt, and that team's fortunes kind of dwindled from there. But what are your thoughts coming off of the big win against Nebraska?
Well, Steve, since we get to live in this adult world, which I'm a big fan of, I looked at that game and I think a lot of people have said, was Nebraska terrible or was Michigan just playing their best football? And you know what? I think it was a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I don't know that Nebraska, they're probably a little bit further off than I thought they were going to be at this point under Scott Frost. But Michigan went out there and, as you said, broke their spirit. I mean, they gave up. And anytime you can make any college football team give up, when you've got prideful guys that, let's face it, I mean, a lot of times you come in as a first-year head coach and you can get the most out of your team if you have some talent there and some experience, because those guys are, hey, we've had a crummy career to this point. Now we've got this great coach coming in. We want to absolutely play the best. Let me ask you this. Would Michigan in 2015 fits that bill? Or would Michigan in 2011 under Brady Hoke in his first year? Would either one of those teams lose a game like Nebraska lost that game on Saturday? The answer is no, because they had pride and they had toughness. And I think Nebraska had some of that and was getting its starting quarterback back. I think what happened is Michigan went out there and kicked their ass. Mm-hmm. And that is something to be really excited about. And, we were talking about this on our show on Tuesday is, you can't, as you said, until they win a big game, we can't really sit here and go, Michigan's turned this whole, turn a corner. At the same time, you can see it the way that they're playing these teams. And if they're playing with progress being made along the offensive line and physically dominating the line of scrimmage and being in the right spot where they're supposed to be and making sure tackles and making plays with their playmakers, those are all things that translate from week to week. And so I took that as a huge positive coming off this Nebraska game.
When you look at Nebraska's 0-2 start, I had the graphic at the top of the show today, Michael. This was not, the earmarkings of a typical 0-2 team. They had outgained their first two opponents by over 300 yards. They were outgaining them by 1.5 yards per play. That is a really good number. All right, they had 11 sacks, and those first two opponents. Colorado's probably going to have 6 to 8 wins at the end of the year. Troy has been a perennial Group of 5 postseason team. They beat LSU last year when LSU went 9-3. So, I mean, those are, those weren't scrubs. I mean, frankly, I think that's better competition, obviously, than Western Michigan and SMU. And so that's when I took a look at those numbers and you start doing some advanced metrics and the way that Frost challenged his team publicly, I really thought they would give us a game, at least for a while. And Michigan came out with their hair on fire, punched them in the mouth, and then just dominated all three facets of the game. So Nebraska may be further away from competing in the Big Ten than maybe we thought. But in its first two games, it put up numbers that usually win ball games for you. And I think we need to acknowledge that as well.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, again, I don't think a Scott Frost-led team, what I know about this guy, I mean, the talent level may be down, and he might be trying to figure out what he has. But guys like Scott Frost, guys like Jim Harbaugh, guys like Urban Meyer and Nick Saban, and the guys that are considered the best coach in college football, one of the reasons that they're considered that is because they're good at motivating, and they have teams that play hard all the time. Whether they're talented enough, whether they play their potential enough, they play hard. And so I was expecting that from Nebraska, and I think we saw that early on in the game. But that just goes to show you that the way that Michigan beat them down, and especially the way that they were handling their offensive line, getting their quarterback, it was fairly early in the game. I think Michigan was winning by 14, and they threw a screen pass to the running back out to the left flat, and he got absolutely trucked by Devin Bush, who had a couple of Nebraska Cornhuskers in front of him, but didn't. I mean, he went right through both those guys to make the play. And when I saw that, and you saw the Nebraska guy react very strongly, like he was ticked. He was mad at his teammates for not making a block. I knew right then they're in trouble because their will here is being tested and being pushed, and they're losing this, and they're starting to fight each other a little bit. And Michigan, how many times, Steve, have we seen Michigan then go easy on an opponent or not take advantage? Yep. And here they were up 30-0 after the first half, and they kept on piling on. Like they were going to do their thing, and regardless of what the score was. I mean, they wanted to win that game 70-0, and they really could have done that if they had kept the starters in there a little bit more.
I'm glad you bring that up because, we talked a lot last year about Harbaugh's sideline demeanor, and some of this stuff becomes, Michigan message board, social media, urban legend, and the truth is somewhere probably in the middle. But I also thought on Saturday, we saw for the first time in a long time, maybe since, again, 2016, that's the Jim Harbaugh I know. You call a timeout with 3 seconds left or 5 seconds left, and instead of, trying to kick a 60-yard field goal, you try to dunk on him one more time with a long touchdown pass. They ran, I love the fact they ran 5 or 6 variations off of that jet sweep action, and I like the fact they put it all on film so that teams now can't just key on, well, Ambry Thomas is in the game, he's going to run the jet sweep. Now they got to have a head on a swivel now because we might run multiple different looks off of that because we have flashed that. When I watched guys like Kwity Paye coming off the edge, man, if I would have thrown a number 3 jersey on Kwity Paye and told you that was Rashawn Gary, would you have thought, all right, I'll totally buy that? Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought this was the cunning ruthlessness we were going to see a lot more of, and we really haven't seen. It died in the second half in Iowa City in 2016, and we've been trying to find it, right? Harbaugh's cunning ruthlessness, we have been trying to find it ever since the second half in Iowa City in 2016, and I thought at least for one Saturday afternoon, the old Jimmy was back a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe it was appropriate that it was Nebraska that forced him to bring it out, and the comments that Scott Frost made a couple years ago about out-hitting Michigan when Central Florida came into town here in 2016, and I hope that we see more of that Jim Harbaugh going forward. I agree with you that we really haven't. We really haven't seen that mercenary, the guy that doesn't care if he's beating you by 39 points, wants to score more. That is the coach that we all signed up for, and that is the coach that we had for a year and a half, and then it disappeared. And certainly there was a lot going on, but I just want to see that ferociousness. And that swagger and that a little bit of that cockiness and arrogance from Jim Harbaugh. And we saw it on Saturday. and I think we'll probably see it again against Northwestern this weekend. And what I really want to see, Steve, is I really want to see it, as we discussed, against Wisconsin and against Michigan State. But that's one of those things where I think you can start to project a little bit from this game. Hopefully that's what we start seeing going forward, because that is a scary Jim Harbaugh, and that can be a scary Michigan team.
The character and cruelty that Harbaugh used to say at Stanford, that's how he likes to win football games, with character and cruelty. And you saw it. I mean, you had Ben Mason taking the ball deep as a tailback, looking like Toby Gerhart, running through holes in the red zone. I loved every minute of it. Now, the question becomes, can they bottle this? Can they? And you're not going to beat everybody 56-10 in this league, but this brand of football travels. This brand of football is a good contrast. You know, you've got Ohio State, for example, is playing more of a wide open offense than we've typically seen under Urban Meyer, who's more of a power spread guy. But we saw Harbaugh when he was at Stanford running that, contrast to Oregon's system and forcing Oregon to play in a phone booth when they maybe wanted to play a little bit more laterally. We have seen this work when he has been ruthless in working it. And I think this game at Northwestern is important because, I'm a big Pat Fitzgerald guy. He's one of my man crush coaches. His style of offense is very similar to Michigan State's. Clayton Thorson's kind of a poor man's Brian Lewerke when he's healthy. They don't have the weapons Michigan State has. I mean, I've watched Northwestern's last couple of games against Akron and against Duke, and I got to tell you, Michael, man, those are some, as we used to say back in the playground and back in the day, those are some thick-ankled guys that Northwestern's playing at wide receiver, if you know what I'm saying, brother. Okay? They got some thick ankles. Okay? So, I mean, I got to believe we're going to play. Don Brown's probably looking at that and thinking, we're blitzing on first down, we're blitzing on second down, we're blitzing on seventh down, we're blitzing every freaking down. We're going to play man-to-man against these guys all over the field because they can't get open. They've lost really their one offensive game breaker in Jeremy Larkin to a sad situation with the cervical stenosis. On the other hand, Fitzgerald coming off a bye, a 1-2 start. They will play spirited on the defensive side of the football, try to load the box, make Shea Patterson beat them. And I think this is a nice dress rehearsal for what Michigan, outdoors, on grass, for what Michigan, the kind of game plan that they're going to be looking at by and large against Michigan State in a few weeks.
No, I agree with you 100% that it is a good test. And I also think it's, whether or not it's a true road game, because you'll have a lot of Michigan fans in attendance there, it's still just the routine of it. You're going to be, you're not sleeping in your own bed, you're not sleeping at the campus inn. You've got to do things a little bit differently, and that is, anytime you have to adjust your routine and adjust your schedule, that's going to help you out a little bit when it comes to like going on the road again at Michigan State, going on the road to Ohio State. Not quite the same environment, but it is, as you said, kind of like a dress rehearsal for this Michigan football team. And I look at it too is really, for me, it's on paper and in spirit, Michigan should probably win this game by 28 points or more. They should be able to do to Northwestern what they just did to Nebraska. To some extent, I don't think they're going to break Northwestern's will. I think this is a stronger mentally team than what we just saw with the Cornhuskers. But they should be able to pound this team. And so for me, it's like I want to see them go out there and play just like we saw them play, to the best of their ability. If you give me the best of their ability, that to me is going to be a positive sign, because can they put them back-to-back? Let's face it, they didn't put it back-to-back when they did Western Michigan and SMU. They didn't play their best first half of football against the Mustangs, and it took a second half kind of figuring things out, and they came back and played great against Nebraska. So can they play outstanding back-to-back weeks? Because they're going to need to, especially when they get to Wisconsin and Michigan State, and then when they get to Penn State. So let's see them put together their A-plus game in back-to-back weeks here.
I don't think Northwestern has receivers. If our corners are locked in, I don't think they have guys that can get open. They have two immobile quarterbacks in Trent Green's son and Clayton Thorson, who's not fully recovered from the knee injury. During the big BTN bus tour, DiNardo said that this was one of the more challenging offensive lines in terms of where they were at in their development that he saw on the entire tour, and they were the last team that they saw. To me, unless we are -2 or -3 in turnovers, I don't see how they get more than one, especially given the way we're putting the ball right now in the field position battle we're winning. I don't see how they can score more than 10 or 17 points unless we're just giving the ball away on offense.
Well, and unless we've got the second and third unit in there. I mean, the only reason Nebraska scored 10 points is because it wasn't Rashawn Gary and Devin Bush and Chase Winovich. So I'm there with you, and it's unfortunate. I really feel bad for Jeremy Larkin because, nice kid, was having a really, really good season so far. And when you took him off the field, we talked about this a little bit on our show early in the week, is this idea that, like, hey, guys will rally around that as a football team, and they're like, hey, we got to win one for Jeremy. But I think when you take your best athlete off the field, that outweighs any type of mental, emotional, circle the wagons type of feel that these guys are going to have. And so you're right. This is a team that's lacking a lot of athletes. And in the Big Ten West, you can win without having great athletes at the receiver position. And if you have a really good running game, you have a good quarterback, you have a strong, stout offensive line, you have a good defense, you can find a way to win in the Big Ten West, because that's Iowa. Iowa's best player was their tight end on Saturday night. That's Wisconsin. That's Minnesota. But that doesn't fly when you're playing these teams in the Big Ten East that have the recruiting advantages they do to recruit the elite athletes. And so I think it's really going to show up on Saturday.
So final question is a bit of a self-serving one, but I cannot be alone because you mentioned there will be a lot of Michigan fans in attendance there. I remember when Fitzgerald was a player at Northwestern, I remember a quote I read from him that he knew Northwestern had arrived when he went to the local sporting goods stores, and next to the Notre Dame and Michigan stuff in Chicago, they actually had Northwestern gear, okay? So there's going to be a lot of Michigan fans there. I'm going to be one of them. I'm taking my son to this game. So do you have any recommendations for Michigan fans coming in? I'm actually staying in Naperville, just outside Chicago. I bought a parking spot about a mile from the stadium, but I'm considering just Ubering from my hotel in and avoiding all traffic hassles thereabouts. What are some of your recommendations for Michigan fans going to the game?
You know what? They've got a golf course fairly close by. I don't think it's a university course, but I think it's like a public course. That's a lot of really good tailgating. I'd recommend that place. Honestly, right outside the stadium, I know everybody says it's kind of like a high school stadium. I don't think that's fair to Northwestern. I mean, there's 40,000 people there or 50,000 people. I think it's like 48,000. But right outside of the gates, I mean, there's really good parking lots for tailgating, and I'd recommend that. I mean, I think, downtown Evanston is okay. You can hop in there if you want. But I just think there's going to be so many Michigan fans. I would just say, hey, Michigan fans, I'm coming. I've got the Michigan podcast. Anybody want to hang out? I bet you there's going to be a lot of people that would just love to have you stop by. But it's just a great place to watch a football game because it's kind of like old school Detroit Tiger Stadium where you're so close to the action. Mm-hmm. So it really works out because you just feel like, if you're in Michigan Stadium and you're, anything real above 50, you're pretty high up there. You're pretty far out there. At Northwestern, you're so close to the action all the time, which is great fun. And it will be, I would bet, out of 45,000 people, I bet you there's going to be 20,000 Michigan fans in attendance. It feels like a de facto home game for the Wolverines. It's a lot of fun. You'll really enjoy it. And just, if you can, take your son, maybe get to downtown Chicago once, because that's one of the coolest things about it, going to Evanston, is that you're going to have one day in Chicago and you're going to have one day at Evanston. And that's what I love about going there.
Yeah, especially with Northwestern starting off with those two early home losses. I think you may even see a larger Michigan contingent than you normally would even there. Michael, good to have you back on the show again this week, and we'll talk to you down the road. Go Blue.
Okay, sounds good. Enjoy your time there.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
If you want to keep up with what we think about the Wolverines all week long, aside from when we're doing this for Michigan Podcast, check us out at WolverineDigest.com or Wolverine Maven, part of the Maven Network, WolverineDigest.com. Myself and Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, we keep you up to date with our commentary all week long. And one of the really cool things I love about how this site works is that the sidebar there, where we can give you, almost like a Mike Florio does at Pro Football Talk, where you can give you little mini updates via Twitter and other interactions, things that you probably want to know, be aware of, but don't require 500 to 700 word columns. I love that part of our website. It's a really easy, functional website to follow, WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you 1/3 of the way through the season. Can you believe it's already 1/3 of the way through the season? Don't they always go by so fast? 1/3 of the way through the season. Are the Wolverines better, worse, or about what you thought they'd be before the season started? And a super majority of you about the same, lapping the field. And, that's how I would have voted as well. And if you look at Michigan's, what are we looking at now? Last 14 quarters, 3 full games, and the third and fourth quarters against Notre Dame. I mean, the score differential is overwhelming. But, we would have taken a couple of those touchdowns that we've scored these last 14 quarters and like to have seen in those first 2 quarters against Notre Dame. I mean, if Michigan wins that game, what are they ranked right now? Probably no worse than 5th or 6th. The computers, by the way, love Michigan. I mean, I've seen data analytics this week over at SB Nation and ESPN's FBI that have Michigan 5th and 6th in the country. I've got them 4th in the Big Ten in my power ratings, and the computers are ranking them 5th or 6th in the country. Why? Because I agree with the computers. That's the team we can have. I need to see with my own eyes that that's the team we do have. They need to show that to me and to all of us. And until they do, sometimes that M stands, most of the time that M stands for Michigan. Sometimes it stands for Missouri. I'm from Missouri, and you got to show me, okay? This week's question of the week is not really a question, but I just needed to show this to you guys. One of our viewers, Joe Carr, sent me this graphic this week. Things I trust more than bum liar. And you can see a one night stand with Charlie Sheen. That's winning. An email from a Nigerian prince. I kind of think the tap water from Flint, Michigan, given the fact, people perished there, and that was a tragic failure of civil society on multiple levels, is probably, no, not probably, it is out of bounds there. But the rest of this, yeah, I think his credibility level is probably on par with a cocktail date with Bill Cosby. Certainly ranks right down there with gas station sushi, which I've never tried, but I've heard it's an adventure for your proctologist. That's what I've heard. Hey, I want to thank all of you that help us put this show together each and every week and help to spread the word, like our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast. Hey, if you get a chance here on iTunes and Stitcher to subscribe and give us a positive review, we appreciate that. Same thing for those of you that are watching us this week on YouTube. We could always use more subscribers, more likes, more positive reviews. Thank you so much for keeping track and being a part of what we do each week here at Michigan Podcast. You're the reason we do this. And you can check us out online at WolverineDigest.com. Follow us on Twitter all week long at Michigan Podcast. Go Blue, and we'll see you next week.